Hey, welcome to Wandering Pages. Today we are listening chapter 5. If do not previous chapter, then playlist link given in description. Now let's start the story. Chapter 5. The First Ascent, Part 1. The moment Elena stepped past the barrier, something inside her shifted, not fear, not hesitation, something sharper, curiosity mixed with a strange sense of familiarity, as if she had unknowingly been walking toward this exact moment her entire life. Behind her, Daniel muttered under his breath, "This is a terrible idea." Elena didn't turn back. That's usually how the best stories begin. The narrow staircase loomed ahead of them, dimly lit and worn with age. Each step creaked softly as though whispering secrets of everyone who had ever climbed it. Elena placed her hand on the railing, cold, smooth, worn down by time. She took the first step. Creak. Daniel winced slightly behind her. "Subtle," he whispered. Elena smirked faintly. "Relax. Everyone's too busy pretending to understand history." They climbed slowly, one step at a time. The sounds of the tour group below began to fade, voices dissolving into distant echoes until all that remained was the rhythm of their footsteps and the quiet groan of the old wood beneath them. Creak, creak, creak. The air grew cooler as they ascended. Dust floated in thin beams of fading sunlight that slipped through narrow openings in the wall. Elena's heartbeat quickened, not from exhaustion, from anticipation. "Do you ever feel it?" she whispered. Daniel frowned slightly. "Feel what?" "Like you're exactly where you're supposed to be, even if you do know why." Didn't answer immediately. He looked up toward the unseen top of the tower, then back at her. "Yeah," he said quietly. They reached a small landing. A single wooden door stood in front of them, old, faded, locked. Elena exhaled slowly. "Well," she murmured, "that would have been too easy." Stepped forward, examining the handle. "No modern lock," he said. "Just a latch system." Elena leaned against the wall, watching him. "You sound confident." "Not," Daniel admitted. "My grandfather described this door." Elena straightened slightly. "He made it this far," Daniel nodded. "He said this is where things stopped making sense." That sentence lingered in the air longer than it should have. Elena felt a chill. "Stopped making sense how?" Daniel hesitated, then reached into his pocket and pulled out the notebook again. He flipped through a few pages, stopping at a section where the handwriting looked rushed, uneven. "He wrote," Daniel said slowly, reading, "Time behaves strangely near the first point." Elena blinked. "That's vague." "Gets worse," Daniel added. He continued reading, "The clock does not measure time here, it remembers it." Silence, even the air seemed to still. Elena let out a quiet breath. "'Kay," she said, "that's not poetic. That's unsettling." Nodded. "Exactly." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Elena stepped closer to the door. "If this is the first point," she said softly, "then whatever your grandfather couldn't understand." She placed her hand against the wood. "We're about to." Looked at her. "You're not even a little scared." Elena gave a faint, almost distant smile. "I am." She glanced upward, toward where the clock mechanism would be. "I think fear is part of the map." Stared at her for a second longer, then sighed. "You really are different from everyone else." Lena raised an eyebrow. "Good different or dangerous different?" Daniel smirked slightly. Still deciding. He reached for the latch, paused, then looked at her. "Ready?" Elena nodded. "Always." Lifted the latch slowly. Click. The sound echoed louder than expected. For a brief second nothing happened, then from above them a deep mechanical sound rolled through the tower. Tick, tick, tick. Elena's breath caught. "That's the clock," Daniel whispered. But something about it felt wrong. The rhythm wasn't steady anymore. It was slower. Heavier, like each second carried weight. Elena pushed the door gently. It opened. And the moment it did, a rush of cold air spilled out from inside the tower. Darkness, dust, and towering above them, massive gears slowly turning. Tick, tick, tick. Elena stepped inside first. Her eyes widened slightly as she took in the mechanism. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Daniel followed. But he wasn't looking at the gears. He was looking at the walls, carefully, searching. Because if his grandfather was right, then somewhere inside this room, hidden between time itself, was the first real clue to the symbol of love. And this time they weren't turning back. The moment the door closed behind them, the world outside disappeared, not completely, but enough. The sounds of tourists, footsteps, distant voices, all gone, replaced by something else, something heavier. Ticky ticky tick. The clock wasn't just making noise anymore, it felt like it was breathing. Elena stood still for a moment, letting her eyes adjust to the dim golden light filtering through the giant glass panels of the clock face. Outside, Philadelphia stretched into the distance, soft, calm, unaware, but inside this tower time felt different. "Do you feel that?" Elena whispered. Daniel didn't answer immediately. He was watching the gears. Their movement wasn't smooth. Every rotation felt deliberate, measured, almost intentional. "Yeah," he said finally. "It's like..." He struggled for words. "Like it's not just moving forward." Elena turned toward him slowly. "Like it remembers where it's been." Their eyes met, neither of them laughed because somehow that didn't sound crazy anymore. Daniel opened the notebook again, flipping to the page with the symbol, the curved lines, the 3 points, but now something had changed. Elena stepped closer. Wait, she leaned in. The lines, frowned. They look the same. No, Elena said softly. They don't. She traced the air above the page with her finger. Before it looked like a design. Her gaze lifted toward the massive gears. Now it looks like movement. Followed her line of sight, the gears turning slow, heavy, tick, 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 and suddenly it clicked. Daniel's eyes widened. The symbol isn't static. Elena finished his sentence, it's mechanical. They both turned toward the clock mechanism, watching, thinking, aligning. Elena walked slowly around the room, observing the gears from different angles. There are 3 points, she murmured. The tower. Eyes moved toward the direction of the Liberty Bell building. The bell. Then she turned slightly toward the backside of the structure. Whatever is behind this place, his voice dropped. What if those aren't locations? Elena stopped, turned. What? Daniel stepped closer to the mechanism. What if they're not places? He pointed toward 3 large rotating components. But positions. Silence. The idea settled between them, heavy, possible. Elena looked at the gears again, this time not as machinery, but as a puzzle. If that's true, she whispered, then the symbol only makes sense at a specific moment. Tick, tick. Daniel nodded slowly. A moment in time. Elena's heartbeat quickened. Then we're not just looking for something hidden. She looked up at the clock face. We are waiting for it. That exact moment, the ticking changed. Tick, 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 slower, deeper, like the tower itself was preparing. Daniel glanced at his watch instinctively. 5:43 p.m. He frowned. That's weird. Elena asked. The clock, he said slowly. It's not matching real time. Elena looked back at the massive clock face. The hands were moving, but not correctly, not precisely, not normally. Your grandfather said the clock remembers time, she murmured. Daniel's grip tightened on the notebook. Yeah, Elena took a step closer to the center of the room. What if it's not showing now? Her voice dropped. What if it's showing then? A sudden chill ran through the air, and for a brief moment, Elena felt something she couldn't explain, not fear, not exactly, a presence. Faint, distant, but real, like a memory brushing against her. She closed her eyes for a second, and for the briefest instant she saw something, a flash, a different time, the same tower but brighter, alive, and 2 silhouettes standing where she was. Daniel's voice pulled her back. Elena, her eyes snapped open, she inhaled sharply. She hesitated. I think, stepped closer. What did you see? Elena looked at him, conflicted, unsure. Nothing, she said finally, but her voice didn't sound convincing. Daniel didn't push, not yet. Instead, he looked back at the gears, and that's when he noticed it. Elena, his voice was lower now, focused. She turned. What? Daniel pointed toward the base of the largest gear. There. First, she didn't see anything. Then, as the gear rotated slowly, something caught the light, a faint engraving, hidden, almost invisible unless you were looking at the exact right moment. Elena stepped closer, heart racing. Wait. The gear turned again, the engraving appeared, then disappeared. Tick. Tick. Tick, Elena whispered. It's only visible when the gear aligns. Nodded. With the symbol. They exchanged a look. This was it, the first real clue. Elena moved even closer, timing her breath with the rhythm of the clock. "Kay," she whispered. On the next rotation. Held the notebook tightly. Be ready. Gear turned slowly, carefully, and as it reached that exact position, the engraving appeared again, clearer this time, letters, not many, just enough. Elena read them aloud. Begin where time first broke. The words hung in the air like a riddle waiting to be understood. Daniel repeated softly, where time first broke. Elena's mind raced. The first point, the clock, looked up at the massive face again. But something happened here. Elena's voice dropped to a whisper, something that changed time itself. Somewhere deep within the tower, the clock answered. Tick. The words refused to leave the room. Begin where time first broke. They didn't just sound like a clue, they felt like a memory. Elena stood frozen, her eyes still fixed on the spot where the engraving had appeared. Even as the gear turned again and swallowed the words back into shadow, she could still see them, burned into her mind. Daniel exhaled slowly. Kay, he said, trying to steady himself. That's not simple. Elena shook her head faintly. No, it's not. She stepped back, her gaze drifting upward toward the massive clock face. The golden light had shifted slightly now, deeper, more orange. Evening was settling in. But inside the tower, time still felt suspended. Where time first broke, she whispered again. Daniel leaned against the wooden railing, flipping through the notebook rapidly. There has to be something, he muttered. Something my grandfather connected this to. Pages turned, old ink, faded notes, then he stopped. Wait. Elena looked at him immediately. What? Daniel's finger traced a paragraph written in tighter, more careful handwriting. This part, I didn't understand it before. Read aloud, not all time breaks loudly, some moments fracture silently between a choice and a feeling. Elena's breath slowed. A choice and a feeling, looked up at her. He underlined that. Elena's thoughts began to race, choice, feeling, time breaking. Her gaze slowly shifted toward the clock again, then to the place where she had stood moments ago, and suddenly that strange sensation returned, stronger this time, like something was pulling her, not physically, but emotionally. Daniel, she said softly. I think this isn't about the building. Frowned. What do you mean? Elena stepped closer to the center of the room again. The clock, the gears, the alignment. She shook her head. That's just the trigger. His expression changed. Then what's the actual clue? Elena looked at him, her voice quieter now. An event. Silence. The idea settled heavily. Daniel straightened. Something that happened here. Elena nodded slowly. Something important enough to break time. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, thinking. This place. Independence Hall. Looked around the room. This is where the Declaration of Independence was signed. Elena didn't react immediately. She was still thinking deeper. That's history, she said softly. But your grandfather didn't write like a historian. Hesitated. No, Elena's eyes narrowed slightly. He wrote like someone who experienced it. That changed everything. Daniel looked back at the notebook, flipping faster now. There's more, there has to be. And then he found it, a page that looked different. Older, worn more than the others, like it had been opened many times. Daniel's voice lowered. Elena, she stepped closer. What is it? He turned the notebook toward her. At the top of the page, a date, but not a normal one. It wasn't just written, it was circled, pressed hard into the paper. July 8, no year, just the date. Elena frowned. That's it. Daniel shook his head slowly. Look below. The date, a single line, written darker than anything else in the notebook. The day love chose silence. Elena felt something twist inside her chest. What does that mean? Daniel didn't answer because he didn't know, but the words, they didn't feel random, they felt personal, too personal. Elena looked back toward the clock. July 8, a specific moment, a specific break. What happened on July 8? She whispered. Daniel's jaw tightened. I don't know, he paused, but I think we're about to find out. If the tower had been waiting for that realization, the clock shifted again. Tick, tick. Tick, the gears slowed, then aligned perfectly. For one brief moment everything stopped, the air, the sound, even their breathing felt suspended. And then the light changed. A beam of deep golden sunlight cut through the glass, straight into the center of the room, right where Elena stood. Her eyes widened. Daniel. But before she could say anything more, the light intensified, the world blurred, and suddenly she wasn't in the tower anymore. She was somewhere else, same place, different time. The room was brighter, newer, alive. Voices echoed, real voices, not memories. People were there, moving, talking, and standing near the window. Two figures, a young woman and a man beside her, their hands almost touching, but not quite. Elena's breath caught because somehow she knew them, not by face, but by feeling, the same feeling she had sensed before, the same presence, the same memory. Her voice barely escaped. Grandma. The woman turned slightly. And for the first time, Elena saw her clearly, young, beautiful, and standing at the edge of a moment that was about to change everything. Back in the present, Daniel reached out suddenly. Elena, but she didn't respond, because she wasn't there anymore. She was inside the memory, inside the moment where time had first broken for a moment. Elena forgot how to breathe. The world around her wasn't just a memory, it was alive. The air felt warmer, the light softer, the silence replaced by distant voices and the quiet hum of a different time. She looked around slowly. Everything was the same, and yet everything was different. The wooden floors looked newer, the walls brighter, the clock louder. Tick, 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 not heavy anymore, not broken, just time. Elena turned back toward the window. The two figures were still there, closer now, clearer. The girl, she couldn't have been more than 20. Her hair softly tied back, a few loose strands brushing her face as the evening light touched her skin. There was something familiar in her eyes, not just resemblance, recognition. And the man beside her, he stood slightly tense, as if holding back words that refused to come out. His hand hovered near hers, close but not touching. Elena's chest tightened, because she understood this moment without knowing why she understood it. This is it, she whispered to herself. The moment. She took a slow step closer. No one noticed her. She wasn't really there, just a witness. A memory walking inside another memory. The young woman spoke first, her voice soft but steady. I can't stay. The words landed like a quiet storm. The man's jaw tightened. I know, he replied, but his voice betrayed him. It wasn't acceptance, it was resignation. Elena felt something break inside her. The girl, her grandmother, looked away toward the fading light outside. It's not that I don't want to, she paused, her fingers curled slightly into her palm. It's just that wanting isn't enough. Man let out a quiet breath. It's not true. She turned to him, her eyes glistening now. It is. Stretched between them, heavy, fragile. Elena's heart began to race. This was it, choice and feeling, time about to break. The man stepped closer. Then stay, he said, simple, desperate, real. Elena held her breath. Say yes, please, just say yes, but the girl shook her head slowly. I can't. Words, soft, final, and in that moment, Elena felt it, not heard, not seen, felt. Something inside the air shifted, like an invisible thread snapping. Tick, the clock stuttered, just for a second, then continued. Tick, 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 but it wasn't the same anymore. Elena's eyes widened. This is it, her voice trembled. This is when it happened. Man looked away, running a hand through his hair. That's it, he asked quietly. No fight, no reason to stay. The girl stepped closer to him now, close enough that their breaths almost touched. There are reasons, she whispered. Too many. Then love, she interrupted softly, isn't always enough to make the right choice. Elena felt tears sting her eyes. Those words, they weren't just part of the past. They echoed through time, through her, through everything she had been running from. The man laughed faintly, broken. That's cruel. The girl smiled sadly. I know. Her hand lifted slightly. For a moment it looked like she might touch him, finally. But then she stopped, her fingers trembled, and slowly she pulled her hand back. That was the moment, not the goodbye, not the words, the space between two hands that never touched. Tick. The clock faltered again, longer this time. The air rippled. Elena felt it wrap around her like a wave. This is where time broke, she whispered. Behind her something shifted, a faint echo, a pull, the present calling her back, but she didn't want to leave yet, not now, not before she understood everything. Wait, she said softly, stepping closer to them. Please. Man closed his eyes. I would have stayed, he said quietly. The girl's breath trembled. I know. I would have chosen you. That broke something deeper. Her lips parted, but no words came out, because she had already made her choice, and choices once made don't change. The clock trembled again. Tick, the sound stretched unnaturally, the light flickered, the edges of the world began to blur. Elena felt the pull stronger now. The memory was ending, the moment was closing. And just before everything faded, the girl whispered something, so soft, so fragile, Elena barely heard it. Find me where it ends. Then darkness. Elena gasped, air rushed back into her lungs. The cold returned, the dust, the silence, the tower. She staggered slightly. Daniel caught her immediately. Elena, her hands trembled, her heartbeat wild. I saw them, she whispered. Daniel's grip tightened. Who? Elena looked up at him, eyes wide, filled with something between fear and wonder. Grandmother, she swallowed. Someone she loved. Clock above them continued its slow, heavy rhythm, tick, 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 but now they finally knew this wasn't just a puzzle, this was a story, a love that had chosen silence. A moment that had broken time, and a mystery that was far from over. For a few seconds, Elena couldn't speak, her body was back in the tower, but her mind still trapped in that moment, that silence, that space between two hands that never touched. Tick, 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 the sound of the clock pulled her back, slowly, painfully. Daniel was still holding her. Elena, look at me. His voice was steady, but his eyes weren't. She blinked once, twice, then finally focused. I'm here, she whispered. Daniel exhaled, relief flickering across his face. Good, he said, because for a second you weren't. Elena swallowed. I know. She stepped back carefully, her legs still slightly unsteady. The tower felt colder now, or maybe she just understood it more. Daniel watched her closely. What happened? He asked. Elena didn't answer immediately. She looked up at the clock, then at the gears, then back at him. I didn't just see something, she said slowly. I was there. His expression tightened. Like a vision, Elena shook her head. No, a pause, like a memory. Silence. Daniel processed that carefully. What did you see? Elena hesitated, not because she didn't want to tell him, but because saying it out loud would make it real. Still, she took a breath. There was a girl, her voice softened, young, maybe 20, listened without interrupting. And a man, she continued. They loved each other. Her eyes dropped slightly, but she left. Frowned. Elena's lips pressed together. She said love wasn't enough. The words landed heavily between them. Daniel looked away for a moment. That's harsh. Elena nodded faintly. It didn't feel like a choice she wanted to make. Looked back at her. Then why did she? Elena met his eyes, because it was the right choice. Again, but this time it felt heavier, deeper. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. And that broke time. Elena looked up at the clock again. Her voice was certain now, not physically. He stepped closer to the gears, but emotionally. Followed her gaze. Explain. Elena pointed toward the moving parts. Everything here reacts to moments like that. Frowned. Moments like heartbreak. Elena shook her head. No, she turned to him. Moments where love and reality don't choose the same path. That stayed with him. Daniel didn't respond immediately because he understood it more than he wanted to. Elena continued softly. That, what your grandfather meant, doesn't break loudly. It breaks quietly inside people. Clock ticked again, slower, heavier, as if agreeing. Daniel looked down at the notebook, then back at her. July 8 was their moment. Elena nodded. Flipped the page again. There was something else, wasn't there? Elena's expression shifted. Yes. Looked up. What? Elena hesitated, then said quietly. She told him something at the end, leaned in slightly. What? Elena's voice dropped to almost a whisper. Find me where it ends. Air changed again, subtle but real. Daniel repeated it slowly. Find me where it ends. Elena nodded. I think that's the next clue. Looked around the tower. The third point. Elena thought for a moment. Maybe, then she shook her head. No, her eyes narrowed slightly. Not a place. Raised an eyebrow. Then what? Elena looked at him. Moment again. Sighed softly. Of course it is. Almost smiled, but it didn't last. Daniel, he looked at her. There's something else. His expression grew serious. What? Elena hesitated. Then said, that girl. She paused, her voice softer now. She was my grandmother. Daniel didn't react immediately, not because he didn't believe her, but because he did. You're sure? He asked quietly. Elena nodded. I felt it. That was enough. Daniel looked at the notebook again, then at the gears, then back at her. This isn't just my grandfather's story. Elena finished it. It's ours. The weight of that realization settled deeply. 2 lives, 2 pasts connected by one unfinished story. And one symbol still incomplete. The clock above them shifted again. Tick, tick, tick. Elena looked up, then slowly smiled, not out of happiness but understanding. We're not just solving this, she said. We're continuing it. Closed the notebook. Then we need to find where it ends. Elena nodded. She turned toward the door. I don't think the tower has anything else to show us. Glanced back once more at the gears, then followed her. Then where do we go? Elena paused at the doorway, her hand resting lightly against the wood, her eyes distant, thinking, feeling, connecting. Where something ended, she said softly, and something else should have begun. Clock ticked behind them, heavy, knowing, as if it had given them everything it could, and now it was letting them go. The door creaked softly as Elena pushed it open. For a brief moment she paused, not because she was afraid, but because she knew the moment they stepped out something had changed, not just the story, them. Daniel stood just behind her. Ready? He asked quietly. Elena didn't answer immediately. Her fingers tightened slightly on the wooden edge of the door, then she stepped out. The sounds of the world rushed back all at once, voices, footsteps, distant laughter, the tour guide explaining history as if nothing extraordinary had just happened above them. Everything felt normal, too normal. Elena blinked against the soft evening light. The sky had turned shades of gold and amber, time had moved forward. But for her it felt like it had paused. Daniel stepped beside her. Neither of them spoke for a few seconds because there was nothing simple left to say. Finally Daniel broke the silence. So he exhaled slowly. We just experienced something impossible. Elena let out a faint breath. Yeah, a pause, and I don't think it's over. Glanced at her. I hope not. Elena looked toward the open square, her eyes searching, thinking. July 8, she murmured. Daniel nodded. Where it ends. They stood there side by side, 2 people connected by something neither of them had expected, not just a mystery, a memory, a love story left unfinished. Elena spoke again, quieter now. My grandmother, she swallowed. She didn't stop loving him. Didn't question it, he understood. You felt it, he said. Elena nodded. A small silence followed, then Daniel asked, so what now? Elena looked ahead, her expression had changed, stronger, clearer. We follow her. Frowned slightly. Your grandmother? Elena shook her head. No, she turned toward him. We follow the moment. Tilted his head. Explain. Elena took a slow breath. She said, find me where it ends. Daniel nodded. Right. Continued. That means their story didn't actually end there. Something clicked in Daniel's mind. It continued. Elena's eyes lit slightly. Yes. Whatever happened after that moment, she looked toward the direction behind Independence Hall. That's where we need to go. Followed her gaze. The third point. Elena didn't answer immediately then. Maybe she looked back at him, or maybe her voice softened. It's something deeper. Gave a small, tired smile. Of course it is. Almost smiled too, but her thoughts were already moving ahead fast, connecting pieces, feeling something pulling her forward again. Not the tower this time, not the past, something else, something waiting. Daniel, he looked at her. Do you trust me? Daniel didn't hesitate. Yes, that surprised her. She blinked slightly. You didn't even think about it. Shrugged lightly. I climbed into a restricted clock tower with you. That counts. Elena let out a soft laugh, the first real one since they entered the tower. Fair point. Then her expression grew serious again. Then let's not wait. Raised an eyebrow. Wait for what? Elena looked toward the fading light. Tomorrow. Blinked. You want to go now? Elena nodded. Yes. Why? She hesitated, then said quietly, because whatever this is, her eyes darkened slightly. It's already moving. The wind passed gently through the square, carrying something unspoken, unseen. Daniel looked around, then back at her. Okay. Closed the notebook. Then where are we going? Elena turned slowly, her gaze settling toward the far end of the historic grounds, toward the part most visitors ignored, quiet, shadowed, almost forgotten. We start, she said softly. where something was left unfinished. Clock Tower stood behind them, silent now, watching, waiting, as if it knew this was only the beginning. That's where today's chapter comes to a pause. But the mystery has only grown deeper. Will Elena and Daniel truly find what the end means? And the biggest question, will that unfinished love story ever be completed, or remain a moment forever frozen in time? If you're enjoying this story read, make sure to hype support it. Backhand index pointing right. Your one hype motivates me to bring the next part faster. Backhand index pointing right. If we reach 10 hype today, the next part might drop today itself. Fire. And don't forget to subscribe, follow, so you don't miss any upcoming chapters of this journey. Your support is what keeps this story alive.